In a small town in Ohio, Officer Greg Thompson had earned a reputation for being tough, no nonsense, and quick to handle situations with authority. He was well liked by his colleagues for his efficiency and straightforwardness. However, he wasn't always the most understanding of others. Greg had a tendency to see the world in black and white. He believed in discipline, hard work, and self-reliance, traits he had honed during his years of service in law enforcement. One evening, as Greg was patrolling the downtown area, he noticed a group of teenagers hanging out near a park. They were gathered around, talking and laughing, and to Greg's trained eye, something about the way they were standing made him uneasy. He pulled up to the curb and rolled down his window. "Hey," Greg called out, his voice stern. "What's going on here? You all need to move along." The teenagers looked over at him, startled. One of them, a tall, athletic-looking boy with short cropped hair and a relaxed demeanor, stepped forward. "Sir, we're just hanging out, nothing wrong. We'll leave in a minute," the boy said, trying to be respectful but clearly not intimidated. Greg eyed him suspiciously. "You think you can just stand around in the middle of the night without causing trouble? I don't think so. I'm giving you one chance to clear out. Don't make me come back here." The boy, whose name was Jake, held his ground. "We're not doing anything illegal. Just talking with friends." Greg scowled. "I don't care. Move it or I'll give you a citation." Jake sighed, frustrated by the officer's lack of understanding. "Look, man, we're just talking. We're not causing any problems. I don't want any trouble." "Then don't start any," Greg snapped back, his tone sharp. He gestured for the group to disperse. "Go home. Now." Jake's friends reluctantly gathered their things and began to leave. But Jake didn't move. He stood his ground for a moment longer before finally turning to Greg. "Fine. But just know that not everyone is like you think," Jake said, his voice calm but with an edge of annoyance. Greg watched the boy walk off, still muttering to himself. He didn't understand why Jake was so defiant. To Greg, the teenager was just another kid with a chip on his shoulder, trying to act tough. He didn't care much for Jake's attitude, and he didn't think much of the encounter. In his mind, he had simply done his job. The next morning, news began to spread around town. Greg's colleagues were buzzing about an exciting event that had taken place the previous night. A local teenager, Jake Thompson, not to be confused with the officer, had won a major gold medal in a prestigious national athletics competition. Jake had been competing in the decathlon, and his performance had set a new record for his age group. His victory was a big deal, and the town was proud of him. Greg's jaw dropped when he heard the news. "Jake Thompson," he muttered under his breath. "Wait, is that the same kid from last night?" A colleague, Officer Samantha Lewis, nodded. "Yeah, he's the one who just won the gold in that big competition. Everyone's talking about it. Did you talk to him last night?" Greg felt a sudden pang of guilt. He had been rude to Jake, completely dismissing him as just another teen who wasn't following the rules. He had no idea that the kid was a medal-winning athlete, someone who had worked tirelessly to reach the top in his sport. Jake wasn't just another rebellious teenager. He was someone who had trained for years, facing challenges both on and off the track to reach the pinnacle of his career. The realization hit Greg hard. He had judged Jake based on his appearance, dismissing him as someone who was just part of the crowd. He hadn't taken the time to understand the kid's background or his potential. The next day, Greg decided to take action. He knew he needed to apologize and do something to make up for his mistake. He found Jake's contact information and reached out to him, asking if they could meet up. Greg felt nervous, unsure of how Jake would react, but he knew it was the right thing to do. Jake agreed to meet, and they sat down at a local café. Jake, still young and somewhat guarded, listened as Greg began to speak. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry for how I treated you last night," Greg said, his voice sincere. "I judged you unfairly, and I didn't know who you were or what you'd accomplished. I was wrong, and I owe you an apology." Jake nodded slowly. "It's fine. I get it. You're doing your job, and I understand that. But you don't always know what's going on with people. You assumed things about me, and I didn't like that." Greg nodded in agreement. "You're right. I assumed, and I shouldn't have. What you've achieved is incredible. You're not just some kid hanging out in the park. You've worked hard for everything you've earned, and I respect that." Jake looked at him for a moment, processing the apology. Finally, he offered a slight smile. "Thanks, Officer Thompson. I appreciate it. And honestly, it's good to know that you're willing to admit when you're wrong." Greg felt a sense of relief. It wasn't easy to admit his mistake, but it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, he realized that he had learned an important lesson. He needed to be more open-minded, to recognize that everyone had their own story, their own struggles, and their own potential. Over the next few weeks, Greg and Jake crossed paths again. They didn't become best friends, but they began to share a mutual respect for one another. Greg would often stop by the local gym where Jake trained, giving him encouraging words when he saw him pushing himself. And Jake, for his part, would offer a friendly nod whenever he spotted Greg patrolling the area. As for Jake, he continued to rise through the ranks of athletics, setting more records and earning national attention. But what meant the most to him wasn't the medals or the accolades. It was the understanding that people could change their perspectives and learn from their mistakes. Jake had shown Greg the importance of not judging others, and in turn, Greg had learned to be more compassionate and open-minded. This story highlights the danger of making assumptions based on appearance and the power of understanding and acknowledging someone's true worth. Greg's journey from judgment to respect underscores the importance of not underestimating others, no matter their age or background. We all have stories and achievements that are not immediately visible, and it's crucial to approach others with an open mind and respect.